Hi, everyone. Welcome in. I just had a spur of the moment thing here. This popped up on my feed and I wanted to watch it. And I thought, you know what, record my reaction to it. And I just might put it up for you guys to also make comments on. It does involve a child. I know a lot of my viewers do not like anything involving children. This is the sentencing hearing. So this is the justice portion. So maybe it will go lighter. So with that being said, let's get into it. This is the 2nd District Court of Utah, Judge Camille Nider, I believe is how she says it. The sentencing of Nicole Scott.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Wait while Ms. Scott is brought out. Good afternoon, Ms. Scott. It is the time set for sentencing, let me just first ask, is the state ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor.
And Mr. Marshall, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then let me have you put your appearances on the record first, and then we'll talk about the order in which we're going to handle things.
Thank you, Your Honor. Letitia Toombs, Weber County Attorney's Office, on behalf of the state of Utah.
Kevin McGay for the state, Your Honor.
Randall Marshall appearing with Ms. Scott.
Brandon Merrill on behalf of the victim's representative.
All right, thank you. And as I said, Ms. Scott is present. Let me just tell you again what I have reviewed for purposes of today and make sure that I have everything. So I did receive a copy of a pre-sentence investigation report that was prepared by Adult Probation and Parole. Mr. Marshall, did you get a copy of that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And then, and Ms. Toombs, the state got a copy of that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then I did get a letter from the guardian ad litem, Matthew Johnson, that was submitted as part of the pre-sentence investigation report, and then a letter from Gavin's mom, Melanie, that was attached to the pre-sentence investigation report. Also had letters, victim impact statements from Jennifer Morse, Scott Peterson, and Mandy Martinez. Then I also had a state sentencing memorandum, a letter from Dr. Lasky at the University of Utah, a handwritten letter that was written by Gavin as a school assignment that was submitted, diagram of the Peterson home, and then as exhibit for a photo video PowerPoint for me to have some assessment of the scene and of Gavin as he was seen at the hospital, and I have had an opportunity to review all of those things.
All right. I know I can't just jump into this without telling you guys what's going on here. All right. On October the 10th, the Utah Department of Children and Family Services finally released a statement summarizing its involvement with Gavin Peterson, who died on July 9th of 2024 at the age of 12. Gavin's father, stepmother, and older brother are awaiting trial on reckless child abuse homicides. This is what state? This was dated in November of 2024, so past tense. He came from two-household family and was residing with his biological father, Shane Peterson, and father's long-term girlfriend, Nicole Scott, at the time of his death. The agency explains that although it worked with each household at several points in Gavin's life as early as 2013, the statement includes only that information relevant to Gavin in the household where his death occurred. It is not clear from this disclaimer what information was withheld from the public, either because it was from the other household or because DCFS decided it was not relevant to Gavin. So there's a lot of redacted items here. Some of the information can be pieced together from media coverage. Gavin's mother, Melanie Peterson, told a reporter that she lost custody of all 4 of her children in 2014 or 2015. So again, this is not the biological mother that's being sentenced today. It's the stepmother. Court documents obtained by the reporter showed that 2-year-old Gavin was found unsupervised outside of his home in 2014, and that in the same year, Melanie pleaded guilty to allowing a child to be exposed to illegal drugs or drug paraphernalia. Melanie told the reporter that she never regained custody of her children from the courts, but that Shane Peterson unofficially returned her third child to her in 2018 and her second child in 2019. Her first child was apparently Tyler, who is charged in Gavin's unaliving, and Gavin was the fourth child. The DCF statements provides a chronology of abuse and neglect reports and agency responses, which are summarized below along with our commentary in italics. Close your ears if you don't want to hear what went on, but I know some of you guys want to know the background. The first report of abuse in Shane Peterson's home is received on May 28th of 2019. They investigated and found that Nicole Scott, the woman that's being sentenced now, had physically abused another child in the home. The Peterson family accepts voluntary in-home services. After a month of services, DCFS concludes the safety concerns have been resolved and they close the case. Just a month. Oh, this is going to make us all angry. You know it is. The other child was clearly Gavin's sister, who is now 19 years old. And she told the KSL TV that she was abused even more severely than Gavin at the time and was even punished for his actions. She described being beaten, tied to her bed, fed only once or twice a day, forced to perform labor in the household and at her grandmother's house. She reported that Scott once shaved off all her hair as punishment for combing her hair without permission and strangling her in the car following a failed attempt to run away. On September 25th of 2019, she told her father that she accidentally broke a sprinkler while mowing the lawn. Her father took her to her mother's house without warning and left her there, possibly saving her life. Melanie Peterson, the mother, reported that the daughter was malnourished and with all her hair buzzed off. After hearing what her daughter had been through, the mother made a report to DCFS after the Memorial Day holiday. Clearly, the May 28th, 2019 report was what that was. On February 27th of 2020, DCFS receives a call reporting abuse of Gavin in another household. They find Gavin to be a victim of abuse and file a court petition. On May the 27th, the court orders both households to participate in DCFS in-home services. Was that the mother? The grandmother? Maybe it was the grandmother's house? Melanie Peterson, the biological mother, told KSL TV that she took a picture of an emaciated Gavin in February of 2020. It would be the last time she saw him. She alleged that Nicole and Shane Peterson found out about the photo and made a false allegation about her, thereby ending her visitation rights pending a judgment by DCSF. That false complaint was likely the February 27th of 2020 report. Okay, that's the other household. So they said that she was doing something wrong. If you don't want the child, let him go live with his mom. I don't understand. August 2020. While the two households are receiving in-home services, DCFS receives a call reporting concerns about Gavin's treatment in his father's home. The information does not meet the criteria required by the Utah state law to open an investigation, but the intake worker shares the information with the in-home caseworker. All right, skip forward to May of 2021. The Peterson family successfully completes in-home services and the judge closes the case. No information is provided about what these services were. Jump forward to September 2022. DCFS receives a report from someone concerned about Gavin's well-being after observing some of his behavior. The hotline worker decides the report does not meet the legal criteria for opening an investigation, and a supervisor approves that decision. The report most likely came from Gavin's school, and his behaviors, including eating food from the trash. And cafeteria worker Rachel Reynolds told the news that she suspected Gavin was hungry even before the school's COVID-19 era-free meal program ended in August of 2022, and Gavin began taking leftovers from the trash. Her colleague said that she and a coworker began paying for Gavin's lunch. That ended when Nicole Scott demanded they stop buying his lunch, but the workers continued to sneak food to him. Fast forward March of 2023. DCFS receives a report regarding physical neglect of Gavin and opens an investigation. 2 days later, they receive another report, which is added to the open investigation. Gavin is interviewed at school without his parents and does not disclose abuse. On May 8th of 2023, DCFS receives a third report alleging physical abuse of Gavin. The investigator visits the home for a second time, interviews the adults, and interviews Gavin outside the presence of the alleged abusers. The case is closed on May 15th with no finding of abuse or neglect. The children are scared to report their parents. I don't understand why these workers, they're supposed to be trained to see these types of things. I don't understand how it's just, do they see so much junk throughout their careers that they just get numb to it all? Is that what it is? So again, these reports likely came from the school. The school district reported the school made multiple calls about Gavin, and Rachel Reynolds said that at least 4 calls were made by the cafeteria workers and the principal. Reynolds, the cafeteria worker, personally observed the nurse and school principal call DCFS when she brought Gavin to the nurse with fingers that looked swollen and infected from picking. Jane Davis mentioned that Gavin came to school with a chipped tooth shortly after Nicole Scott learned that cafeteria staff were feeding him. Perhaps that accounted for the abuse allegation. In August of 2023, Gavin was withdrawn from school. Of course he was. That's what they do, right? And he would be taken into homeschooling. There are no more reports until July 29 of 2024, and Utah has no policy in place for monitoring children withdrawn. Oh, God. Utah has no policy in place for monitoring children withdrawn from school following allegations of abuse or neglect. This is just amazing. Amazing. Oh, okay. July 9th, 2024, DCFS receives a report that Gavin is in the emergency room with injuries that appear to be the result of abuse or neglect, and he dies that same day. So they get the report in August of 2023. He's withdrawn from school, and within 11 months later, he's passed. The police investigation into Gavin's death has revealed that Gavin was abused for years. He was kept locked in an uncarpeted room without bedding or blankets while adults monitored him with multiple cameras, and he was often beaten and starved, sometimes given only bread and mustard to eat. Nicole Scott, Shane Peterson, and Tyler Peterson were arrested and charged with child abuse homicide, aggravated child abuse, and endangerment of a child. Gavin's treatment can be defined as torture, a type of child abuse that some have observed may be increasing in Utah and around the country. These cases often include confinement, starvation, beating, and isolation. So here are the unanswered questions that they have. Utah's report on Gavin Peterson's death, when compared with the media accounts from Gavin's mother, his sister, and school staff, raises more questions than it actually answers. The May 28, 2019 report, the allegations that the sister made to her mother, who presumably included them in her 28th, 2019 report, concerned multiple reports of physical abuse, confinement, and forced labor. Both children have had a physical exam and a forensic interview. How is it possible that allegations of this magnitude that turned out to be true resulted in a case that was closed in a month and that was also described as voluntary? The February of 2022 report. This report about the abuse of Gavin in another household is clearly the false allegation stemming from his mother's photograph of an emaciated Gavin. How did that result in a substantiation against her for abuse? The case was open for more than a year during the height of COVID-19 pandemic. Were there virtual visits? Does that explain why the caseworker observed nothing of concern? Why did the biological mother never get her visitation rights back after the case was closed? Those are the questions we have. August 2020 report. What concerns were raised and why did they not meet the criteria to open an investigation? Was this report really shared with the in-home worker, and did that worker try to determine whether they were true? September 2022. How was this report, obviously from the school and conveying that Gavin was seeking food in the trash, not judged to meet the legal criteria for an investigation, even by a supervisor? The reports in March and May of 2023. Why did the investigation conducted from March to May of 2023 fail to find the abuse of Gavin? It was so obvious to school personnel. Wasn't he thin? Shouldn't he have received a physical examination? If he denied the abuse, was the investigator unaware that it was just a scared child refusing to do so? Was there any discussion of taking him to a child advocacy center for a forensic interview? Key takeaways in the article. The first major takeaway is that Utah's CAPTA report does not tell us whether DCFS did all that they could do to protect Gavin. The information shared in the report complies with state policy, which in turn complies with the very vague requirements of federal law. But much more detail is needed, including documentation of the reasoning behind the rejecting certain reports as worthy of investigation, the entire record of each investigation, including interviews and documents, and a report of every interaction with the family during the in-home case. A few states post critical incident reviews for some death and nearly fatal cases, but such reviews are expensive. Not all cases get reviewed, and internal reviewers may be biased on behalf of the agency. The only way to ensure accountability and to inform needed changes is to release the full case file on the family with certain names redacted for at least 5 years preceding the fatal or near fatal event. The second major takeaway is that in spite of the lack of detail and the information provided strongly suggests that the problem in this home were long-standing and there were many opportunities for DCFS to discover them. It appears that the systematic problems prevented the diagnosis of issues that should have been obvious. A former DCFS caseworker told KUTV that she left the agency after struggling with overwhelming caseloads and a culture of simply checking boxes. She explained that while cases demanding immediate attention are usually addressed, other cases showing red flags are dismissed too soon as safe enough. Safe enough. She placed primary blame on the legislator for not allocating adequate resources, saying that workers want to do their jobs, but they are being placed in impossible situations. It's unfair to put them in these situations where they don't have the time to produce quality work. Or if they do decide to put in the time, they're sacrificing so much. The third major takeaway is that Gavin's fate was sealed once he was withdrawn from school and the reports stopped coming in. In its Make Homeschool Safe Act, the Coalition for Responsible Home Education proposes that a child cannot be withdrawn from school for homeschooling within 3 years of being investigated for abuse or neglect, regardless of the outcome, unless there is a risk assessment by social services or child welfare that finds that the child will not be endangered by being schooled at home, and the home educator agrees to a monthly risk assessment for the next 12 months. See, I still think even with that, you're still putting the child's fate back into the hands of somebody who's like this coworker or this caseworker said, she's overloaded. That's the problem. The problem seems to be money. So we're throwing our money at so many things, but we're not taking care of our children. Gavin Peterson was failed by the agency that was meant to protect him. A few children suffering similar torture have been lucky enough to escape to safety, like the boy who escaped from the home of parenting YouTuber Ruby Frank and saved himself and his sister from likely a death. But most children in these situations have no recourse unless the people being paid to protect them have the time, the training, support, and resources to investigate fully and respond appropriately. To ensure that happens, the public must have access to the complete records of cases in which the system has failed. See, I know what they're trying. I know why they don't want to open up the files. Because the scary thing is that there's a lot of false claims out there. I'm sure there are a lot of false claims out there, especially when you're dealing with like a child custody case. That could turn somebody's world, their career, everything upside down if it was out in the public, right? If somebody wanted to come after you for something like that, they could tear you down for it. But there has to be another way where there's checks and balances, that there's somebody else that's overseeing something here. It shouldn't be put back on the public to sit here and look through these files to see if every child is being taken care of and every DCFS worker has done their job. That's not the public's responsibility. That's why we pay taxes for these programs to run properly. So why aren't these programs, why don't they have enough money to work? Why don't they have enough money to run these programs? Why are these caseworkers so poorly paid? And I think that if they were paid better, we could have more of a fight on our hands. It's definitely something that our legislatures need to look into. All right. So now that you know the case, let's get to it.
In addition to that, I did receive a sentencing memorandum prepared by Mr. Marshall's office titled the Mitigation Report that was done with the assistance of Dr. Is it Orton?
Right.
Okay. All right. Who's with the Weber Public Defender Group, social worker therapist that works there. Is there anything either side intended for me to review that I have not listed? Ms. Toombs?
Nothing from the state.
Mr. Marshall?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Then I would like to hear from the state first, including any victim statements that may need to be read, or that any victim representative that wanted to speak. And then Mr. Marshall, I'll hear from you. Potentially Ms. Scott, if she'd like to be heard, and then we will go from there.
Thank you.
Ms. Toombs.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state does have a victim letter that will be read by Ms. Pitt.
All right. Ms. Pitt, thank you. Is this different than what I heard last week? Okay. All right, thank you. Then I do have a copy of that. I didn't receive a separate copy for today, but we will make it a part of our file here.
Perfect.
Thank you, Ms. Pitt. Go ahead.
Dear Judge Snyder, my name is Maylani Peterson. I am writing in regards to Shane Jesse Peterson's sentencing and Nicole Scott's sentencing and the death of Gavin Peterson, my brother. My life has been completely upside down and forever changed since July 9th, 2024. My little brother meant so much to me, so learning about what happened to him really took a toll on me emotionally. I wake up every single day filled with anger and sadness that Gavin can't be at home with his real family. The damage this horrific crime has inflicted on my closest family members and myself is 100% irreparable. Gavin had one of those souls that was a one of a kind, and he deserved the life that was taken away from him, and so much more. It makes me feel physically sick to my stomach when I think about some of the things that Nicole Scott did to him, and I will never forgive her for any of it, or for anything else that she did. My family and I will be grieving Gavin for the rest of our lives, when we should not have to. Both Nicole and Shane are completely incapable of being decent parents and should never have another child in their care, let alone the ability to live a regular life outside prison walls. Shane fully allowed Nicole to physically, mentally abuse his own children, and at absolutely no point did he show any signs of discomfort with what was happening or any desire to stop it. My entire life, all I wanted was a father who loved and protected me and my siblings the way I thought Shane would. Instead, we were left with an emotionally unavailable man who cared more about protecting his own image than he did about being a dad. I don't ever want to be recognized or known as his daughter. I find it disgusting and insulting beyond any amount of words. I can't even remember the last time he hugged me or my brothers without only using one arm and staring down at his phone screen the entire time. It hurts even more to see children who have a good relationship with their dads. As much as I would never wish for any child to go through any kind of abuse, I still wonder why Shane couldn't ever be anything like those dads. My father is not a father. He is a full empty shell of a man who only cares about benefiting himself. He knew everything horrible that was going on and didn't even have the heart to think about how humiliated and alone Gavin must have felt. He didn't care. He made sure he had a warm place to sleep while they left Gavin with nothing. The only form of closure for me would be for both of them to die the same way they robbed him of more than just his life. They took every memory he was supposed to make and every important milestone he was supposed to read. Every I love you from our mom. Now I will never get to grow up with him again and watch him enjoy the rest of his childhood. Please don't give these inhumane people a second chance at living a normal life. That is the first thing Gavin deserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pitt. Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. This sentencing is an interesting one for me. As the court is aware, Ms. Scott entered a guilty plea and stipulated to consecutive sentencings. That being said, in her PSI and in the mitigation report, she denies all responsibility. This is consistent with what she has done throughout Gavin's life. Deny, deflect, downplay. In fact, what stood out to me is that she blames everybody else except herself, including Gavin. Gavin was naughty. Gavin didn't behave himself. Gavin wasn't a loving child. But what's interesting is that nobody outside of these three people saw that Gavin. What everybody else saw was a respectful little boy, a kind little boy, a loving little boy, and a hungry little boy. His only transgression reported by school staff and bus drivers and lunch ladies, teachers, even family members, the only transgression was that he would take food. Why did he take food? Because Nicole was not feeding him. In fact, this book is full of text messages, photographs, Facebook messages that investigators were able to recover during the course of the investigation. I included some of those texts, and obviously not all of them, but I included some of those texts. When talking about how naughty Gavin was in July of 2023, a year before his death, Nicole report is asking Tyler, how much did he drink? Like the can almost is empty. Response from Tyler, about a quarter. From Nicole, I bet he's done that before. From Tyler, I'm sure he has too. From Nicole, and this is why the door is locked to the room, because he's sneaky. That is the transgression that warranted locking him in his room. In terms of other bases for taking him out of school and homeschooling him, they didn't want DCFS called. In one exchange between all of them, Nicole reports that the school nurse had called her. And in her text message to Shane and Tyler, the group message, she says, get ready for more DCFS. In another text responding to a concern that the school nurse had raised, she texts, he does this for attention. I effing hate him. She used the entire word and capitalized it. And it makes me hate him more and more. She shoves the blame off on Tyler. She says Tyler should have taken better care of his brother. But yet there's text messages that have been recovered where she is the one who's ordering Tyler to punish Gavin, make him do push-ups, make him lay flat on the floor with his hands straight, make him get back in the box, make him beat him, make him eat soap. She would not give him drinks. There's text messages where they talk about the fact that she hadn't given him anything to drink that day. The only thing on the day that he stole the can of Shasta and drank a quarter of the can, she had not given him anything to drink. As we go through Gavin's death and understand why he died, Nicole Scott is at the forefront of it. Nicole Scott chose to lock him in his room. Nicole Scott would take photographs of his injuries. Nicole Scott watched him on the camera and would tell Tyler every time that Gavin did something, go punish him. One of the photos that was located, and the court has seen a copy of it, shows a very serious wound in his groin. Gavin died from sepsis. And as the court knows from reading Dr. Lasky's report and letter, that that sepsis could have come from an infection, or did come, it is an infection, it could have come from that wound in the groin. She took a photograph of that on June 28th. She did not seek any medical care for him. She reports, I had no idea that he was so sick. And yet she's the one watching him on the cameras. She's the one photographing him. She's the one keeping him in a diaper. She's the one locking him away so he can't clean himself, so that he can't use the restroom. This is a woman who does a magical job of painting a picture for herself outside the home. She convinced friends, neighbors, family members that Gavin was a bad kid. And that she was just, when they saw her punish him, he was just such a bad kid. Family members report that during group family activities, Gavin was made to sit off to the side. He was not allowed to interact with the other parents or with the other kids. Her story, nobody ever saw this, was that Gavin would beat up on people, that he was mean, that he would do other things. Yet she and her co-defendants are the only ones who ever report that. People convinced themselves that what they were seeing was not true. But even family members, school bus drivers had concerns, and they reported it. And when DCFS would come to the door, or when law enforcement would come to the door, she would deflect, deny, and downplay. And she was good at it. She is sitting here pretending to show remorse for what she did. The remorse is that she's facing a major consequence, not because of what she did to Gavin. Her remorse didn't start until she was charged, until she had to come face the consequences for what she did. She had no remorse when Gavin was being given CPR on her floor. She had no remorse when Gavin was rushed to the hospital. Frankly, she didn't even have remorse when she answered the questions in the PSI. Your Honor, Nicole Scott deserves each and every second of imprisonment. And I think that AP&P did an excellent job in writing the pre-sentence investigation report. I want to pick out one thing that they said, and this is on page 3.
Sorry, what page?
Page 3. I know the court has read it fully, but this one was powerful. Nicole Scott, this family deprived Gavin of food, love, dignity, clothing, and protection. And when they learned others in the school were providing for him, they intentionally put an end to it. No matter how long the individuals in this tragedy spend incarcerated, there are systems in place guaranteeing their basic human rights. Those fundamental human rights and system were non-existent for Gavin. Nicole was abusive to her stepdaughter, shaving her head, choking her, threatening her. I could go on, and I did go on in greater detail in my memorandum about the abuse against her stepdaughter. She committed much of the same abuse on her as she did on Gavin. Thankfully, Em was able to get out of the situation. Ms. Scott not only endangered her son by having her son Brixton, beat, she also endangered him and put him at risk by placing him in a home where it normalized such abhorrent behavior, where it normalized a child, her biological son, sitting and playing video games and complaining because Gavin was not. Normalized the fact that a child is locked in his room and the other family members don't really know anything about him. Normalized that it's okay to hurt and kill your child. Your Honor, for all of the reasons stated, as well as the stipulated sentence, we ask the court to impose the maximum sentence possible.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Mr. Marshall?
Thank you, Your Honor.
First of all, Your Honor, I want the court to understand that nobody here is here for any reason that would be pleasant. Everyone here realizes that there's been a terrible tragedy, and that includes Ms. Scott. Sometimes when we're sort of in the thick of things, when we're in the middle of things, it's difficult for us to recognize the reality that's around us. Gavin was, no question, a challenging child. He was difficult to discipline and to care for, but that does not excuse the way he was treated. Ms. Scott and Shane Peterson recognized the challenges. They participated in counseling for a year related specifically to parenting Gavin. They sought help from DCFS, but that didn't last. Nicole was overwhelmed. She was. For example, Gavin would urinate on his mattress, on the rug, on the floor, so she removed them. What do you do? What do you do when you give them a mattress and they urinate on it to the point where it just stings? What do you do? Well, she did what she did. Now, I'm not justifying it. I'm just trying to help the court understand that at the time, she was so overwhelmed that it was difficult for her to think straight. Now, you take that and then you place on top of that the fact of her own abuse as a child. And I don't understand the dynamics. I don't understand the logic, but I do know from experience, from seeing many, many cases, that often those that have been abused, for some reason, end up being more abusive than you'd think it would be the opposite, but it's not for some reason. In any event, during that time, she believed she was doing the best she could initially. Now, I know it sort of snowballed on her, and at some point, she was so overwhelmed that she just couldn't cope. She just couldn't deal with it, and that's obvious with some of the information that the court has received. However, over time, contrary to what Ms. Toome says, she's not here acting today. And she's not here just because she got caught. She's not here crying because she knows she's going to go to prison. She's here because she recognizes now just how terrible Gavin was treated. She recognizes now, sort of having gotten her head up out of the fog and being able to see reality again, she recognizes just how awful this was. And she's truly sorry. She is. It's not just, oh, I got caught. She has willingly accepted a more severe punishment than Shane did. She knows the consequences. Ms. Toombs is asking for the most extreme sentence that she can receive under these circumstances. She's already agreed to that. She knows that's what she's expecting. She's accepting that. She's accepting responsibility. I can't explain, nor can she, why things became the way they did, why they went from having a difficult child to treating him in a way that just never should have happened, and then becoming worse and worse and worse. And yet, even in spite of all that, when the police went in, they took pictures of the place, and there's medicine all over. They knew he was sick to his stomach. They had all kinds of medicine for his tummy ache. It wasn't that they were oblivious. They were trying in their own feeble way. They weren't completely oblivious to Gavin's plight. Now, having said all that, again, we recognize the fact that it just wasn't done right. He was not treated properly. She acknowledges that. She admits that. She'll tell the court that here in a minute. She is ready, Your Honor, to take responsibility and to take the lumps that go with that. She knows what is expected. She knows what her prison term will be. And she entered into that agreement willingly, knowing that she would bear greater responsibility because she does have the greater responsibility. And she's willing to accept that. There's no way she can bring him back. There's no way to make this right. There is justice, there's punishment. She's taking that. But at the end of the day, it's just a tragedy. It just is. And there's nothing she can do to make that right. She is willing to take responsibility. She's willing to do the time. She's willing to suffer, to be punished, but that's all she can do. And she's here willing to do that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Mr. Merrill, I should have called on you before I called on Mr. Marshall, but as the victim's representative, was there anything you wanted to say?
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly, what the defendant has done here is worse than anything that I think any of us can imagine. So I did try to write down some words to maintain my composure and decorum with the court. There are a few words strong enough to describe the cruelty that Gavin endured at the hands of the defendant. This was not a case of neglect. This was prolonged torture, carried out by somebody who was supposed to be a parent, but treated him with less care than most of us would offer a stranger. The evil stepmother in Cinderella, someone we often point to as the embodiment of cruelty and evil in fiction, would have been a better parent to Gavin than the defendant. Nicole made a choice every single day to withhold food, dignity, and love from a child who depended on her. She watched him waste away through cameras in his room. She gave him a demeaning, inhumane nicknames and refused to even acknowledge him by his real name. She didn't just fail him, she hated him. This wasn't one bad decision. It was a campaign of abuse that lasted for years. It ended with a 12-year-old boy alone, starving, locked in a room, dying. Your Honor, there's no sentence long enough, no punishment severe enough to reflect the depth of suffering that Gavin endured and the complete absence of humanity that was shown to him by the defendant, something she will receive within the confines of the prison walls. We ask that you impose the maximum sentence under law as has been agreed to. Gavin's life mattered, and I hope that you and the Board of Pardons let her ultimate punishment reflect that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Scott, it's your opportunity to tell me what you want me to know in anticipation of sentencing. I'd like you to stand if you can. Do you feel like you're able to do that? Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. I want to say I'm truly sorry. I am. Gavin did pass away in my care. I should have done better by him. He's deserved better. And I wish I could go back and change so many things, but I can't. I need to tell all the people that have been impacted sorry. Nolan, Brixton, Tyler, Shane, but most importantly, Gavin's family. And Gavin, I'm so sorry that I failed him. I'm just sorry, Gavin.
Thank you. You can sit back down. Ms. Scott, there was sentencing last week for Mr. Peterson, and my guess is that you've heard that I had some harsh words for him last week.
We're going to go back and watch the hearing for the father and the son. Here's my problem with what was just said with this monster, is that if she was truly remorseful, if she truly had a stake in this game, so to speak, she there would have been a lot more from her. She basically said what she thought the judge needed to hear to keep her sentence as light as possible, and that's what it boils down to. It's complete bullshit. Excuse my language.
And I don't want you to think, and frankly, I don't need to repeat myself, except for you weren't here. Nobody else needs to hear my words, frankly, but you. And I will also tell you that this case is difficult, not because I don't know what to do with you, but because I don't know how to convey to you, but then also to the people who are here and look at this proceeding as closure in some ways, anticipate or hope that justice will be done, and yet address some of those issues for both the family members and for the members of the community that have been interested in this. You're the person that's being sentenced, and so most of my comments are directed towards you, but I do have some other ones. I think that it's very difficult to, there aren't enough adverbs and adjectives. There's not a word that conveys the horrific nature of what happened here. I long ago stopped saying I've seen everything, because I've said that a few times in my life and then something comes up. I don't want you to think that I think that this is the worst case I have ever seen, because I'm not going to say that. There's always room for something worse. But this is one of the most horrific cases I have ever seen. Last week I mentioned that, I was a defense attorney, I was a prosecutor, and then I was a defense attorney again. Last week I said it was for 25 years. I remembered I actually graduated from law school 30 years ago this month. And so most of that time was as an attorney on both sides of it. And I have been a judge, I think, for 7+ years now. And this is an absolutely horrific case. I want you to understand how seriously we have all taken it. And part of that is included in terms of what I have reviewed, came from a letter from Dr. Lasky, who works at the University of Utah Child Protection and Family Health Department. And she outlined in a very helpful way what Gavin had experienced. So this isn't part of the autopsy. This didn't come from the medical examiner's office. Came from Dr. Lasky, who does child abuse investigation, forensic child abuse, meaning that there's been a death associated with it. And I am going to put some of this on the record for you because I don't know that you have read this. I know it's part of the discovery and you've had access to it. But I want to make sure that you have heard it because if you haven't read it, you need to absorb it. The investigation revealed, and these are Dr. Lasky's words, not mine, that there were significant concerning indicators of what Gavin was enduring at home. He was always hungry and scavenging for food. Due to repeated attempts to have his safety evaluated by DCFS, his caregivers ultimately removed him from school entirely, further worsening his isolation. He endured not being allowed to wear clothes other than diapers, being forced fed, and then possibly willingly ate his own feces. Being subjected to extreme discipline, confinement, and forced tasks such as cleaning in ways that would be considered outside the norm. In the days leading up to his preventable death, his father reported he was vomiting and had at least one seizure. No medical care was sought. It's likely that the symptoms described were the early signs of the bacterial infection that would soon kill him. Notably, he has had multiple possible explanations for the sepsis: ingestion of the feces, ubiquitous ulcers, meaning the bed sores that he had, malnutrition leading to blood disorder, and subsequent reduction in his immune response. The information available in this case is clearly consistent with severe psychological abuse, physical abuse, malnutrition secondary to food restriction, and child torture. Gavin likely endured unimaginable suffering in the weeks, if not the months, leading to his death. The history provided is consistent with child torture. Child torture is a medical diagnosis that includes components of severe physical abuse, restraint, unusual disciplinary practices, starvation, and severe psychological abuse, including isolation, spurning, verbal abuse, and terrorizing. Child torture often ends in the death of a victim, but prior to the death, the child is so psychologically traumatized, it is not uncommon that they will begin to manifest psychiatric symptoms. A child of Gavin's age is still dependent on caregivers to provide food, shelter, clothing, safety, nurturing, and medical care. However, they are at an age that they can attempt to save themselves from things like starvation by scavenging food or eating non-food items. The hunger drive and starvation has been documented in the medical literature. Gavin was most likely aware of the fact that there was food and the rest of the family was eating. He also probably smelled the food they ate. It is likely this caused substantial anguish and distress. A common late-stage manifestation of starvation is the ability to overcome revulsion and eat non-food in an attempt to sustain themselves. Considering the psychological abuse Gavin endured, being isolated from children at school, outside contact with anyone, restriction to his room, constant monitoring with cameras, not being allowed to wear clothes, being forced to wear diapers, being deprived of love and medical care, all would have been profoundly impactful on his psyche. By report of the school contacts, this was essentially a normal child who was driven to the point of psychological breaking. He would have been cognizant of what was happening, understood that it was wrong, and that the adults in his life, who he should have been able to rely on for all things, were in fact his tormentors. It is without question that Gavin experienced physical pain prior to his ultimate death. His body was riddled with evidence that he was beaten more than once. The lack of body fat and diminishing muscle likely made the pain worse. To summarize, the physical injuries identified in Gavin, his state of malnutrition, and the subsequent history obtained support that he endured child torture in the days and weeks, if not months, leading to his death. He would have been cognizant of what was happening, how he felt, and who he should have been able to turn to for care and support. He would have been hungry to the point of being willing to risk known physical consequences in order to obtain any sustenance to keep him alive and to overcome the innate disgust of ingesting feces. He would have felt fear and sadness and pain. Furthermore, his siblings would have sustained psychological trauma as a result of being in that same environment. Those are words that I have never read, such poignant words that I have never read in that same manner. The only thing that comes close to it is I read a lot of books regarding World War II. And by read, I mean I listen to, because I'm of that age where it's easier to listen sometimes than to read. I was reading a book recently about World War II prisoners of war who suffered unimaginable isolation, deprivation of basic human needs and conditions, that they were starved, their heads were shaved, they were given numbers instead of names. And part of the reason for that was to dehumanize them. They generally dressed the same, but often they were stripped of anything about them that made them individuals and made them unique, including their eyeglasses, including anything else that could be taken from them. They had a very bare existence. Those people that perpetrated that abuse have gone down in history of the absolute worst parts of our civilization and of humankind. That, I agree, pales in comparison, and I am not in any way comparing this in terms of a broad application. But individually, as I listened to the description of what they did to those adults, and these were adults, and how it broke them, and how so many of them, first of all, they did anything to survive. They worked, they tried to stay out of the way. They tried to blend in. They tried not to be unique. A lot of them, as we know, met their deaths because of starvation, and then many more because of the conditions that they lived in, and then many of them were exterminated. But those comparisons rang so true to me as I listened to that book over the last couple of weeks about what you did to Gavin. First of all, you claimed, and you still do claim, a problem that, as far as I can tell, did not exist. Gavin, as far as anyone besides you and Shane, did not describe a child with behavioral issues. Those are things, frankly, that other people would have seen. People would have experienced at school, and yet, as far as I'm aware, there's absolutely no report of that, but from you and Shane, and then perpetrated, I think, somewhat through Tyler. I think that in addition to that, I understand that Gavin was taken to a psychologist. He was diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, but truthfully, I'm not sure I believe that. And the reason for that is those are things, and the letter from Gavin reflects this, and reflects back to the example that I gave a minute ago. It sounds to me like for a very long period of time, Gavin tried to do everything he could to earn affection from you and from his dad. He tried to be compliant. He didn't start to, and maybe the urination, defecation thing, maybe there's some truth to that, but let's all remember you'd locked him in his room, and I'm not quite sure how he was supposed to overcome that. But the bottom line is, all of those reports to his psychologist are self-reports. I can imagine this little boy sitting in the doctor's office with you, and I noticed that you were at all of the appointments and his dad was at some of the appointments, and agreeing with whatever you said about him. One, because if he crossed you, you were going to punish him. And two, because he wanted to survive. He wanted to live. He wanted to go to school. He wanted to be able to eat with the family. He wanted to be able to go to the barbecues. He wanted to be able to go to Lagoon. And my guess is that he was willing to agree with whatever you said in those therapy sessions. I didn't get the impression from any of those therapy sessions that those were one-on-one therapy sessions or any session where he felt like he could speak freely. You were the architect of all of this. Shane may have played more of a passive role, but I don't think for a minute that you weren't the architect of Gavin's destruction. I think that at the beginning, did you anticipate, if I play my cards right, Gavin's going to starve to death? I don't think that's true about you. I don't see that in your personality. But I think about, and I think what the information we have is probably at least 5 years, going back 5 years, day after day, event after event, you had the opportunity to put a stop to it. I don't have any impression or any evidence that you did it because Shane told you to, or that you did it because Tyler told you to. In fact, the opposite is true. When I read some of the directions that you gave Tyler and some of the things that he was instructed to do, and then you watched on the camera whether or not he was doing it, those are just incredible to believe. That you said have him turn his face so we can see him, that he has the soap in his mouth. Nothing in there for him to wash it out. Nothing in there in that room to help him out. That you could see on the cameras well enough to see if he was standing up straight when he had to stand in the blue box. You could see whether or not when he was laying down, if he had his arms stretched out the right way and his palms up or down. Don't think for a minute that I believe that you were unaware of what was going on with that little boy. You knew exactly what was going on with that little boy. And the consequences, I don't think you cared about. You did everything you could to strip Gavin of his humanity, of his ability to receive and accept validation and love. He had these little slivers of validation and love. The bus driver loved him more than you did. The bus driver cared for him more than you did. The lunch ladies cared for him more than you did. And in fact, when you found out that those people were helping him, you put a stop to it and said that it was necessary. And instead of letting other people take care of him, you prohibited people from taking care of him. And you found someone weak, like Tyler, who you could use as your henchman and make him fulfill some of those distasteful responsibilities. It's Tyler that mentions that, or in a statement, something that Tyler made, that you were the one that was feeding him feces from a bowl prior to any of his self-consumption. But the fact that he realized that how disgusting that would have been, the fact that he decided that he would try and survive by eating his own feces and his own vomit, that tells you
like that.
It's my turn to talk. I believe it did happen like that. He was trying to live. And you pled guilty to murder. You acknowledged that you were the one that caused these events that led to his death. And I think that it's fair for you to hear that in this forum, because otherwise people are going to hear what is in this mitigation report. This mitigation report, first of all, I have no fault with the mitigation report itself, except for 99% of it is based on self-report. And I will tell you, I think 99% of it is false. It's not verifiable. It's directly contrary to the evidence. And I think that you have spent so much time over the last years making up excuses about why you did what you did, that I'm curious if even your allegations of being an abused child are true. Now, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that they are, but I will tell you, I honestly question them. You have painted a picture, and that has been conveyed to me through your sentencing memorandum about what you went through. And I don't think there's hardly anything in there that is true, because it all came from you and none of it can be verified. There was a part, and frankly, it's inconsistent with so much other information that I have. This is what the summary says based on your report. And remember, this is dated after you pled guilty. It says, Nicole affirms that Gavin was fed adequately in the home and that food was not withheld from him. She said she was in absolute disbelief that Gavin's illness could be severe enough to have caused him to expire. In response, she performed life-saving measures, CPR, and placed him in the shower in attempts to revive him prior to the arrival of EMS medical personnel. It's important to note that Nicole made attempts to help Gavin for many years, specifically to save him from the abuse at his mother's home, to get him help through therapy, to work with DCFS on positive parenting skills. Nicole saw her harsh response to Gavin as necessary to fix Gavin's behavior. Tragically, her failure to understand her own trauma history means she was blind to seeing the extent of her actions. I don't think any of that is true, and I think you know that that is true. And that's what makes this case so hard. You are not the victim here. I don't know if you have ever been a victim, but you were never the victim of Gavin. And for you in any way, shape, or form to try and convey that you were is offensive and disturbing and unexplainable to me. I want to take a few minutes and address the family members, specifically Mom and Gavin's sister, who is one of the victims of the abuse. First of all, Melanie, where's Melanie? Melanie, first of all, I want you to understand that you have joined a club that nobody wants to belong to. And that is of mothers who have lost children to tragedy and from violence. And I consider that to be something that I would assume that you will experience and think about every single day for the rest of your life. Other family members, I think, feel similar grief, and especially Melanie. And I want to acknowledge that in this space for the two of you. And the reason for that is because you have given messages. I'm sure you also feel guilt about, could I have done more? And I just want you to know that, truthfully, from my perspective, I haven't thought about what could have changed this. Going back and revisiting who could have done what and what should have been done, it's really hard to do under these circumstances. I'm sure you have thought about it, and I just want you to recognize that I hope that as you channel sort of that grief, maybe some of that guilt that you feel, first of all, I hope you are feeling it as you move through it, and that you're not letting it stop you from moving on in life, even though it will be heavy and it's a burden you will carry all your life. I hope that there is a way that you can channel that for good. I look at some of the people that we see that started foundations, that have started legislation changes, all of those kind of things. I hope that you can address that. One of the things that was brought to my attention was, potentially someplace for you to grieve, a garden, something that will live on, even though Gavin does not. I think it's also fair to some of the community members, the lunch ladies, specifically the teachers, the bus driver, those people that did show an interest and tried to do within the bounds of what they had to make a difference in Gavin's life. First of all, I want to acknowledge for those people, your instincts were correct. And there's a lot to be said for that. I think that we live in a world where the environment and the culture is such that we shouldn't interfere. And we do have to only do that within the bounds of what we can and what we should do. But your instincts were correct. And for those who have care and oversight over children, first of all, it's a special task, and it does come with some intuition and some instinct that you have to acknowledge, even if certainly, hopefully none of this repeats itself. I think that there's healing again that needs to be done, and I really hope, Melanie, maybe you can establish a garden for Gavin that other people then can go to and can grieve at as well. Nicole, I hope you understand, and Miss Scott, I hope you understand that sometimes people sit in that chair, and I want to, as they go off to prison, say, do your best, because at some point you're going to get out. A glimmer of hope, a ray of hope, something for you to hold on to as you go down to the prison. Truthfully, I am not going to be that ray of hope for you. I don't know that you will get out, and frankly, I hope that you don't get out. I think it's entirely fair for you at this point to serve the rest of your life in prison. I think of some of the tangential consequences for you. You're never really going to see your grandchildren. You're never really going to see your children achieve things. You're going to be stripped of your parental rights, I think, of your youngest, who's still underage. And I want you to understand that that is minor in comparison, first of all, of what you have done to Melanie, but it's minor in comparison to, I think, for what you deserve. You are going to go down to prison. It's going to be consecutive, and it's going to be where you're guaranteed rights and protection. You're going to have a bed that has a blanket. You're going to receive food. It's nutritional. You're going to have the ability to exercise. You're going to have the ability to associate with other people. And I think that all of those are things that, frankly, your dignity will remain intact. And it can remain intact because we don't do that to other human beings. At the end of World War II, and I don't know where it came from, I could have done some research, but there was a rallying cry of some sort that said never again. And that's been repeated for all of these years since the end of World War II. Never again. And frankly, I'm going to adopt that for you. Because Nicole, never again should you have this kind of contact with a child. Never again should you probably see the outside of the prison. And never again should this ever happen to another 12-year-old little boy that he starved to death in response to what someone perceives as behavioral issues. Why? Because this is not what we do to other human beings.
Amen.
Nicole, if you'll stand with your counsel, or Ms. Scott, if you'll
I
stand with
love
your
this
counsel.
judge.
Are you stipulating to the restitution for the funeral expenses? Okay. First of all, let me get the right piece of paper. Ms. Scott, in connection With your conviction in count 1, murder is a first-degree felony, the court will impose a sentence of 15 years, and that may be up to life in the Utah State Prison. Count 2, aggravated child abuse, intentionally or knowingly causing that aggravated child abuse is a second-degree felony. The sentence will be 1 to 15 in the Utah State Prison. In count 3, aggravated child abuse or intentionally or knowingly causing that child abuse is a second-degree felony. The sentence will be 1 to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. On count 4, aggravated child abuse, intentionally or knowingly causing that child abuse is a second-degree felony. And I believe that that is the count that relates to Melanie. The court will impose a sentence of up to 1 to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. On count 5, obstruction of justice obstruction of justice for a crime that could have been a capital or first-degree felony. The obstruction itself is a second-degree felony, and the court will impose a sentence of 1 to 15 in the Utah State Prison. On count 6, obstruction of justice, again, is a second-degree felony. The court will impose a sentence of 1 to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. Count 7, endangerment of a child is a third-degree felony. The court will impose a sentence of up to 5 years in the Utah State Prison. And count 8, possession or use of a controlled substance is a Class A misdemeanor. The court will impose a sentence of an indeterminate term of up to 364 days in the Weber County Jail. But this one can be served at the Utah State Prison. I am looking at the pre-sentence investigation report. I agree with the aggravating factors that were outlined. First of all, that the offense caused substantial physical or psychological injury to the victims, that the offense was characterized by extreme cruelty or depravity, that the offense involved 2 or more victims, that the offense involved activity that continued over a significant period of time. And finally, I'm adding a other aggravating factor, and that is your attempts and efforts to cover up and to minimize what happened is a specific aggravating factor. Now, I recognize that you've pled to obstruction of justice, and this is on top of that and involves the conduct that was not included in the obstruction charges, and there was a lot of that. There are no mitigating circumstances as it relates to this case, and for that reason, I am going to run all of these counts and all of these charges consecutive with each other. I am also going to order for the Board of Pardons that they give you credit for the 292 days that you have served in the Weber County Jail. You're entitled to that. Finally, I am going to order that there be restitution in the amount of $1,000. Sorry. Yeah. The restitution to the Utah Office of the Victims of Crime for $1,325.34. That's joint and several liability with Mr. Peterson. That amount, unless it's paid by the end of today, will go down to the Office of State Debt Collection for collections. I'll also acknowledge that that claim will remain open, and any other request for restitution needs to be requested during the time of the statute, and I'll ask that at least that information come to us, that it may be ongoing within the next 90 days. I'm not going to automatically set it for a review. I'll wait to hear from the county attorney's office as it relates to that. Ms. Scott, I am going to remand you back into the custody or to the sheriff's office for transport down to the Department of Corrections. The Board of Pardons will take jurisdiction of this case, and of course, we all know that they will make a determination of how long you really serve in prison. I know that you are not that old. I know that you may have a lot of time left, but I am going to communicate with the Board of Pardons that I hope that they hold you, and I hope that they hold you for the rest of your life. You'll have 30 days from today in which you can appeal the sentence of this court, and the court is ordering that that sentence begin forthwith. I'll have you remanded back into the custody of the sheriff's office.
I apologize. Can we also have a protective order, a permanent criminal protective order issued for the same parties as we did with Shane? That would be Debbie, Melanie, and Maylani, Melanie, and BP as well.
BP doesn't, and CP?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Ms. Scott, I am going to order what's called a permanent criminal protective order. That's a protective order that prohibits you from having any contact with the named parties. And I am going to order that as it relates to BP, because he is her natural child and she is still legally his parent, her rights been terminated?
That is
All right. Then there is to be no contact with even him. And that contact means that you're not to have any written contact, you're not to have any messages sent, indirect or direct, that you are prohibited from communicating with anyone, especially those that are listed, but let me emphasize, with Tyler, who is not going to be in custody in the same place that you are in custody. The minor children, then of course, Melanie and Maylani are out of custody, and no messages should be going to any of those people. If so, that will be a violation of your criminal protective order and can subject you to new charges. I know that there's been allegations that you and Mr. Peterson were using the phone system over at the jail to communicate in ways that I had tried to prohibit. And I will tell you that the prison, frankly, is going to be a little bit better about enforcing that. And you are not to have any contact with those people. That is a protective order that can only be modified by me or the Board of Pardons. It cannot be modified by anyone else or someone sitting in this seat, at least in my seat. And so understand that that is not something that anybody can say, oh, it's okay. And I expect that no one will. I'll issue that and have it served on you over at the jail before you're transported. I think it may, if it hasn't been served on you, it will be served on you before you get, or as soon as you get down to the prison. I am going to allow the state to withdraw exhibit number 4. I don't want that to be on the record, and it is sealed for what we have. In addition to that, I am restricting any access to that by anyone other than the attorneys that are assigned to this case or to the Board of Pardons. And as I mentioned last week, the only image of Gavin that I think is fair for there to be in the public domain is that picture of him, his school picture, where he is smiling and where he is a happy child, and before all of this horrific abuse started. So the rest of that should be under a protective order, and everyone is to abide by that. All right, that will be all.
Your Honor, I apologize. Could we also ask that the defendant provide a financial declaration for restitution in accordance with 7738B204 within 45 days?
Okay, yes. Mr. Marshall, if you'll make sure she gets that. All right, now is there anything else?
No.
Anything from you, Mr. Marshall? All right, anything else, Ms. Toombs or Mr. McGahey?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. That will be all. Court will be in recess.
Thank you, Judge.
They have stripped her of all. They've stripped her of all communication with her family, and I absolutely love it. There are people that aren't great animal lovers that treat animals better than what she treated this child. It was purposeful, what the things that she did to him. And did you guys see how she reacted when they said that she wouldn't be able to see her kid? All of a sudden it mattered. All of a sudden the children mattered when she couldn't see her kid. All right, so I was looking while we were watching that. I was looking up to see the father's sentencing, and the father's sentencing was not aired for some reason. But there is a news article or news thing on it, and I thought we will watch that really quick.
I won't sugarcoat it. Tonight will be a little bit of a tougher conversation. To break it down with us, criminal defense attorney Sky Lazaro is here, and she'll join us momentarily. We're discussing the sentencing of Shane Peterson, the now convicted killer of his own son, Gavin Peterson. The 12-year-old endured years of abuse and countless interactions with the Utah Division of Child and Family Services, or DCFS, before dying in the hospital from severe injuries and starvation complications in 2024. Let's listen to part of court today.
It is without question that Gavin experienced physical pain prior to his ultimate death. His body was riddled with evidence that he was beaten more than once. The lack of body fat and diminishing muscle likely made the pain worse.
And it goes on from there. That was Judge Camille Nider emotionally retelling the medical examination of Gavin Peterson.
Gosh.
She went on to say she found it telling that she herself was more emotional in court today than Shane Peterson was. And she also mentioned it was the first time that she could recall in her 25 years on the bench that she cried in open court. Called it unacceptable that Shane allowed, encouraged, condoned, and even facilitated the abuse against Gavin Peterson more than one time, and Shane was found guilty on all 5 charges against him. Judge Nider says she will encourage the board to keep him locked up until he dies. Hard to mince words there when Judge Nider was extremely forthcoming with her thoughts today.
Now, see, they were showing, I thought that was the brother they were just showing with the blonde hair. I thought the dad had the dark hair, but maybe I'm confusing the two. I like how she said that she wouldn't. Guys, please tell me there's not people out there putting this child's picture up of the horrible pictures of, you know what I mean? Like after death or right before he died, or I hope not. I certainly hope not. I was looking on the internet to see if I could find anything. You know, I wanted some happier pictures of him to put up, and he looks skinny in all of them. A lot of kids that age do look skinny, but he didn't. One of them, he doesn't look healthy skinny. Now, there was an interview as well. Let me see if I can find that real quick. There's an interview done with the biological mother that I would like to hear. Well, let's listen to this. This is the advocates for Gavin. I don't know who these are. These might be the lunch ladies. Let's see what they say.
Rachel, what were your thoughts just being in that hearing and everything that was said?
It was definitely hard to sit through. We heard more than what we had looked into because we didn't want to know everything that you went through, so we found out more today. That makes it really hard to stomach. I am so grateful for the judge because she really let him have it, and I'm grateful for her and her words and what she said, because I really feel like she is making sure that justice will be sought and that Gavin will get justice.
This was last week when he was sentenced.
And I'm still just hoping that there's change so that this doesn't happen to more children, because this never should have happened to Gavin. There were lots of times that he could have been saved and wasn't, and it's just not fair. And we miss him and we love him, and it's hard for everybody that knew him, and everybody was affected by this that knew Gavin. And so I really appreciated the judge, and I think we all did, the words that she said today, and that I think she's really trying to get Gavin his justice, which even the maximum sentence is not enough for what they did to Gavin.
No.
Miss Jan, what was kind of going through your mind from day one? You knew that this wasn't accidental.
I'm just heartbroken, and I just wished I had did more to help him.
I think this is the cafeteria worker.
I'm glad for the judge today because I feel like justice is being served. But I believe an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and I think he should be starved in prison. And so that he knows how Gavin suffered and the things he went through.
You've had to carry this, since news broke that Gavin had passed away, this thought that, was there enough that was done?
No, I should have done more.
No, it's not on you.
We should have done more. Maybe that's more correct. We should have done more to push the issue to getting help.
No, our calls should have just been answered.
Yeah.
Our calls should have been answered.
Yep.
We
You're
tried.
definitely
We did
right.
everything.
We tried.
Absolutely right.
But-
She's absolutely right. They did everything they could. Now, who is this? Susan Phillips, former co-worker of Shane's. Let's see what she says.
First and last name, please.
Susan Phillips.
And former coworker with Shane.
Yes.
Okay, how did you feel to be in that courtroom today, Ms. Susan?
I feel like Judge Snyder really hit the right emotion for the situation. I was very impactful. I wish he had more power in the state of Utah and could just put him away for life. I feel like it's a travesty that he could possibly only get 8 years on something that should be a life without parole. But that's she gave him what she could with our laws. And I think that if we could change the laws when a child is murdered by the hands of their parents or anyone else, it should be an automatic life without parole. I don't think that 5 to life is an acceptable amount of time. But she did a good job. And I liked how she addressed Shane. I could see Shane's face, and there was no emotion. And it really showed the cruel and calculated person that he was and that I knew him to be. He was very charismatic at work, but he could be really cruel to others. And I saw that two-face today. When he read his statement, he tried to show some fake emotion. And when he was being talked to like he should have a long time ago, he couldn't.
To hear more from Dr. Lasky's report, from what investigators discovered in Gavin's death and the suffering and torture that he endured, what went through your mind? What stood out to you?
Sepsis. To die of sepsis. Sepsis is I watched a friend die of sepsis, and it's a very painful sickness. That alone, let alone the bed sores, being put in a room without any comfort, without a blanket or something to cushion that little frail body for the amount of time. That's roughly about 380 days. For every day, it must have been like a year of torture for that little boy. And I feel like every single day that he spent in there should be a year of Shane's life. I think 380 years is not enough time.
I agree. You know, I like the way she just broke that down. If you think about it, I think when she said 380 days, I kept thinking 380 days that the social workers had that time to throw up a flag or push their supervisors more or whatever they needed to do to make something happen in this case too. I know that, you know, they say they're overworked and understaffed and all that, but they're the only ones. That's where the buck stops at the end of the day. Well, the buck stops with the parents, but God forbid, we know we can't depend on that these days. People aren't raising children, they're just having them. I want to watch this really quickly. This was an interview. It's like a short interview. Let me see. This is the biological mother speaking out.
We're hearing from the family of a 12-year-old boy who died of suspected abuse. His mother says she fought for years to see her son and regain custody.
Prosecutors say Gavin died of starvation at the hands of his father, stepmother, and oldest brother. News specialist Garna Mejia joins us live with the details.
Yeah, good evening, you guys. Melanie Peterson is still trying to understand what happened inside her ex-husband's home, where on July 9th, Gavin Peterson was found dying. She says the warning signs were there years ago. She contacted DCFS, but she alleges they failed to act.
It broke my heart to know that he died that way. I don't know how anyone could do that to anyone.
With support from her brother, Melanie Peterson is speaking out for the first time, heartbroken over the death of her youngest child, 12-year-old Gavin Peterson.
Horrible.
Gavin was under the legal custody of his father, Shane Peterson. He lived with Shane, stepmother Nicole Scott, and oldest brother, Tyler. All three now charged with child abuse homicide over what prosecutors alleged was a prolonged pattern of abuse and starvation.
The last time I saw him, I took a picture of him because he looked so skinny.
Melanie was last allowed to see Gavin 4 years ago when Gavin's
4
father and
years.
stepmother found out that she was taking pictures to show the Utah Division of Child and Family Services. Melanie says they blocked her from ever seeing Gavin again by making a false complaint that would end her visitation rights until a judgment was made, a process that dragged out due to COVID.
See, I don't understand that part of it. So they could just make an accusation against the mom where there's nothing to show for it, and she loses custody altogether. But they have all these calls made on them, and the kid is staying in the home. The child dies in the home, and they had all these calls. But yet the mother can't see the kid ever because that one accusation could have been more than one, but still, that has to raise red flags, and there has to be something in the system. I know there is. How many times do you think these advocates hear from divorced parents fighting for custody? It's got to be a constant battle. The one thing that hurt this mother, though, was she had past drug charges, and I guess that's what did it.
And it's not that I didn't try. No one helped me.
Melanie claims one of her other children also endured similar abuse at the hands of Shane and Nicole, being tortured and starved, fed only a slice of bread with mustard once a day.
Nicole trapped her in the room. The lock was on the outside. She couldn't get out, and she zip-tied her to the bed. There was a camera, so if she did anything, if she did get out, they would see it on the camera.
After years of trying, Melanie says she regained custody of 2 of her 4 children only after Shane dropped them off at her house and told her he didn't want to care for them anymore. But Gavin's life was not spared.
I never would imagine that Shane would let this happen, to starve him and let him die.
Now, in a statement, DCFS said that each child and family has a right to privacy, and they will refrain from sharing any specific information about this case with us.
How convenient for them, right? They're going to refrain from giving any information due to the family's privacy. Meanwhile, the family's speaking out. The sad thing is, guys, is that while we've been sitting here watching this, there's some other child or children, multiple of them probably, sitting in a same type of room with no blanket and no bed, where their bones are just probably all that's touching the floor because they don't have any muscle. And this is what we, as a society, have been finding over and over again in these cases. And you look at the one that we just did, this captive in Connecticut. The reason that one's gotten more exposure than any of them is because he's 32 years old. And it's like, how did that happen? Well, how did he survive? How did he survive? And how come he could survive and the others can't? I'm going to end it here. And for those of you who hate these kind of stories, I'm sorry. Every now and then, it's good to show this stuff. People need to talk about it. It needs to be discussed. We have a problem. We have a problem in our country with this, and it needs to be fixed. I don't know what the solutions are. I have a feeling, though, that a lot of people do. A lot of people with power do. And God, is it a matter of writing and signing a damn form? You know, could it be something that easy? Maybe this shouldn't be left up to the states anymore, because the states are failing at this. So do we start allowing the federal government to take this over? Do we want to go that far with it? Do we need to go that far with it? Somebody's got to do better. We can't get any worse than we already are. And then we hear about cases where it's flip-flopped, where somebody's being accused of something they really didn't do. And they're being deprived. I hear that all the time. You hear that a lot. And it's hard to give those cases any kind of weight. It really is, because you just don't know. You just don't know. God bless that judge. She was amazing. I how she sat there and cried in front of the father is just so sad. Can you imagine being responsible for that and having to sit there and just feel like I'm going to do everything in my power I can, and this is all I can do? I don't think that this woman will ever get out on parole, because I think she's going to go before a parole board that's always going to see the heinousness of her crimes. And hey, that's if she makes it, because you know what they say about people in prison that harm children. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being here with me this evening. Again, apologize for the sad story, but it's something that sometimes we have to talk about these. Gavin is now in a better place. He's in the best place he could possibly ever be in. And we have to remember that. And I hope his mother remembers that. Please pray for his family members and his siblings. Y'all have a blessed night.